Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new tutorial series here on my YouTube channel. If you're new, I'm Shannon and I'm a pet portrait and wildlife artist and I specialise in coloured pencils, and here on my channel I make tutorial videos so that you can draw along with me and create a drawing that you're proud of too. So for this new series we're going to be drawing this gorgeous horse, which is, I think, a bay quarter horse. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what this breed is. And this reference I got from a royalty-free stock photo website, which is Pixabay. And I will make sure to link that down below for you so that you can download the reference and have that set alongside the drawing while you're working on it. I'll also link to the line drawing down below as well, because I always provide a line drawing that you can either print out or get up on a tablet like an iPad or something and trace it out, and then you've got all of the proportions in the right place and you don't need to worry about getting all that right. But of course you're more than welcome to freehand if you'd like to. It's totally up to you whether you want to challenge yourself or you're here just to try out the coloured pencils and make sure that you get that right. Everything that you need to know is linked down below. I'll also link a video all about how to do outlines that I've got on here, so that might help you with the line drawing. And I'll also detail all of the other things in the description too, like the coloured pencils that I'm using. I'll mostly use the Faber Castell Polychromos for this tutorial, but occasionally I might need to throw in a few different brands like Caran d'Ache Luminance. I do use those quite often as well, and sometimes I use the Caran d'Ache Pablos and maybe Derwent drawing pencils, but we'll get to that when it comes to it. There might not have to be any extra colours just yet. Yeah, I always leave a full list of the coloured pencils that I use, and you can either purchase them individually or purchase a full set, or just use whatever coloured pencils you have available to you. I don't want you to feel put off from following this tutorial just because you don't have all of the exact same supplies that I've got. I'm also going to be using a piece of Canson Moulin hot pressed watercolour paper for this tutorial, but again, feel free to use whatever paper you can get your hands on. I often use the Strathmore Bristol Vellum for tutorials, and you can also get a smooth version, so Strathmore Bristol Smooth if you prefer. But yeah, feel free to use any paper you want. I just love hot pressed watercolour paper and the way that it feels. This one in particular is my new favourite. I used to use the Fabriano Artistico hot pressed watercolour paper, but they changed the surface a little bit. But this is very similar to that old texture of the Fabriano. It's quite smooth but has a little bit of a grain so that you can get lots of layers, and that is one of the most important things when drawing in coloured pencils, which you'll soon come to learn in this tutorial. So yeah, I'll also link anything else that I use like sharpeners or erasers down below too, but this is going to be a real-time tutorial, so I'm going to be talking you through each and every step of the way, and it's going to be split into multiple videos because these tutorials can get quite long. They take hours and hours to draw, so if that's something that you've got time for and you want to give it a go, then let's get started. Okie dokie, so like I said, the coloured pencils that I'm using for this tutorial mostly are the Faber-Castell Polychromos pencils, and they're what I use for all of my commissions, all of my pet portraits, and that's because they're really pigmented. They're an oil-based pencil, so they've got quite firm leads, and they're really easy to blend, and you can get a lot of detail in there. If you look at how sharp that pencil is, it just means that you can get into all of these little details and create as much of a realistic drawing as possible. So that is why I use those pencils, but like I said, use whatever you can get hold of. You don't have to have the exact same supplies as me to do this drawing. So the first colour that I'm going to use is the dark Sepia 175, and I often start with this colour, to be honest, because it's just perfect for getting those darker details in the eye. And I always start with the eye because I feel like if you get the eye wrong, then the whole piece is going to look a little bit funny. The eyes need to be right, otherwise it just looks off. So yeah, I always start from the eyes and then work my way out from there. So make sure you've got a really sharp pencil. If you don't have the Polychromos, just find a really dark brown that's almost black, like a grey dark brown. what you can do is you can go online and you can look at the colour swatches of the pencils as well and just sort of compare and see what you have that's closest. So I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to use that to outline where these darker areas are. So I'm looking for anywhere that's really, really dark around the eye. So like this bit here, the upper eyelid, I'm going to add a bit of a line there, and I'm not using a hard pressure. I like to use quite a light pressure when I'm building up the layers for coloured pencils, because you can't undo anything. Once you've added, it's really difficult to take away. So the lighter you are, the more easy it is to correct any mistakes that you make. So I've just done that upper bit of the eyelid, and I also want to do this bit here. You can see that shadow just above the actual eye itself. So just mapping that in. I like to add a guideline, and then once we erase these pencil outlines, we can see where everything is. So, just looking for any extra details. So I'm going to go around this bit here that's sort of around the outside of the eye. And there's like a little bit of a line down there on the outside edge of the actual eye itself. So if you just keep sort of watching what I'm doing and also looking at the reference so that you sort of understand why I'm putting the marks down where I'm putting them. I'm also going to add where this really shadowy area is here in that inner corner. And let's also take that underneath the eye. And there's a little bit of a shadow that comes up, sort of in that outer corner of the eye there. So I do like to add a lot of detail into my drawings. It's what makes them look realistic. And you just need to take your time with it. So don't feel like you need to rush and get impatient. You have to be patient with coloured pencils. It's like a rule. So I'm also going to add this into the pupil. I've got like a sort of sideways pupil like that. Because of the sun, it's a really sunny reference, so it looks quite small. There we go, and then let's also just bring that line that we did there down here a little bit. You can see it sort of comes down like that. One thing that's like really important with coloured pencils, or any realistic art to be honest, you have to keep looking at the reference to see where these little shapes are. You're sort of deducting it down to as many little shapes and lines as possible. So you need to keep looking at the reference. Don't just sort of make up what you think is there, because that's when it starts to look a little bit weird. If you're doing commissions like I do, where you draw people's pets, you don't want to be doing that because it won't look like the pet. People like it to have a likeness to the animal that you're drawing. So just add in this line underneath there, and then there's also a bit of a line here, and it kind of sits in the same place as where that one comes down, so about there. And while we're here, let's add the eyelid in. So the actual crease of the eyelid, the main one, there's a few little creases that sit underneath it as well, but just want to do this main big crease. And then let's do that little one that comes up there. And then there's one that sort of comes like that. So it looks a little bit crazy at the minute, to be honest, but it's all good because once we start to add a bit more of the colour and stuff, it'll make more sense. We're just getting the basic guideline for now. And I'm going to add that little bit here, sort of like the lower eyelid crease. Comes down like that. Also comes around that upper corner bit. So just adding that in. A little bit of a fold there. Okay, and like I said, that looks a little bit crazy, but it's all good. We're going to make it look right, I promise. Oh, just before we move on, actually, I need to add that inner corner of the eye. Can you see where that sort of inner eyelid comes up? Like that. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my eraser, and I use a putty eraser just because you can mould it into any shape that you want. You can make it really teeny tiny and get loads of details, and they don't get those little bits that come off an eraser when they go everywhere. So they're perfect for coloured pencils, and I'm just going to use this to get rid of any of those initial pencil outlines, because when you colour over those with coloured pencil, they smudge and they go really horrible, and you can't get rid of them. They're sort of smudged into the colour that you've added. So I like to do my guideline with the coloured pencil and then erase those initial outlines. So we're always kind of drawing it twice, but it's worth it because it looks really mucky and horrible if you don't erase those. But yeah, I'll link, like I said, the eraser and everything in the description. So looking at this eye now, I'm sort of trying to figure out what is the lightest colour that I can see in that eye. Sort of like the main area. What is that lightest colour? And it looks really warm to me. Really warm, really brown and orange. And so because of that, I think I'm going to use an orange colour as the base. So with coloured pencils, we always start with a base colour, and we add that in, smooth out the paper a little bit, and it just gives us a really good foundation to then add more layers on top of. So we tend to work from light to dark, because with coloured pencils, unfortunately, you cannot layer a lighter colour on top of a darker colour very effectively. It's not like pastel pencils where you can just keep going, keep adding stuff on top. Goes on really nicely, you know, the same with paint, you can just keep adding colours on top. If you make a mistake, you just add a colour on top and it looks alright again. You can't really do that with coloured pencils. It's a little bit less forgiving, you have to be careful with it and you have to layer from light to dark. And it's really important that we use layers with lots of different colours to get that really rich, sort of multi-dimensional look to a drawing. So if you look at this eye, there's actually a lot of different colours. There's like blues, maybe even yellow, green colours. So we're essentially using the paper as our palette and mixing all of those colours together on the paper, rather than a painter where they'd have a paint palette and mix the colours on the palette and then apply them to the painting. We're doing it manually ourselves on the paper, if that makes sense. So I want to start with the lightest colour that I can see. So I'm going to use Burnt Ochre 187, which is a orange colour, and I tend to have like a core set of colours that I use a lot for almost every drawing, and this is one of them. I use this a lot, as you can see. It's teeny tiny, little stubby pencil. So I'm going to use that as the base colour for the areas of the eye where I can see a lot of orange. So this inner corner, that's quite orange. Just gave it a little sharpen because it was very blunt. And I'm also going to add some of this into the eye. Anywhere that looks orange. So I'm going to leave it a bit lighter there, you know where that greeny, yellowy looking bit is. I'm going to leave that a bit lighter. So again, I'm just softly blending. I don't want to add loads and loads of pressure. Just enough that it gets a nice even coverage. And I'll bring that up to the top, but there is like a little bit of a blue tone at the top. So I'll probably use like a blue toned pencil just to get that variation. So I'm mostly just going over this middle area and the bottom left, like that. One thing I also want to say is that there's no one way of doing this with coloured pencils. There's probably a variety of colours that I could use in this eye and it would still come out looking really similar or really good at the end. This is just one way of doing it, and this entire series is just one way of doing it. There's so many different techniques, and you know, it's good to follow different tutorials from different artists and get a variety of ways of doing it and see how you like to draw. There's no one way to do it. So yeah, that is just something that I also wanted to mention. I think you eventually, over time, once you become a bit more experienced with drawing, you do sort of manage to see colours and figure out what colours to pick yourself. Like it's something that takes a while to learn, but you do, the more trial and error that you do, the more you figure out what works and what doesn't. So I often get asked, how do you choose colours as a pet portrait artist? So now we're also going to add that slightly blue toned colour in, and I'm going to use the Cold Grey 1 230, which is another base colour that I use a lot. I use it in a lot of drawings, pretty much almost every drawing to be honest, especially the eyes, and I'm just going to add that into the top of the eye. So I'm sort of blending it into that orange a little bit. So if you still press quite lightly, I'm going to add a bit to that right hand side as well. Can you see where it's a little bit blue there? So again, if you don't have the Polychromos, just look on a swatch list and just see what sort of colour this is and compare it to what you have and just use the closest that you can use. I'm going to leave a little bit of white paper showing through there. Can you see that little highlight in the eye? We'll never be able to get anything as white as the actual paper, so just leaving that there a bit. I mean, you can use your eraser if you've gone over it a little bit. Just, I want that nice pop of white to show through. So we're just making sure that we're leaving that there. So just bringing that down there. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of that yellow colour. So use any yellow that you have to hand, but I'm going to use the Cadnium Yellow 107, which is another colour that I use a lot in tutorials. So it's a handy one to have if you're sort of trying to grow your collection. But yeah, just any yellow that you have really. It doesn't have to be as bright as this. This is just sort of what I can see. I'm going to blend that in to that area there where it looks a little bit yellow. Like that. So you can see we've sort of got those base colours coming together now. I might be tempted to go back to my dark sepia 175 and just add those lines in a little bit darker and crisper now that we've got some base colours down. It's always easy to add more, but it's always difficult to take away, so I try my best to do it so that you make as few mistakes as possible. Yeah, I am sort of really going into detail on explaining why I'm doing things, but if there are any absolute beginners following this, then hopefully it's helpful. So just going over and making those areas stand out a little bit more. And what I think I'll do is go over that pupil and just start to build that up a little bit so that we can see where that is. So Just go over it a few times if need be. That's already looking more like a horse's eye. So the next colour I'm going to use, let's start to use a bit of a brown colour. Get that nice brown tone in there. And I'm going to use Burnt Umber 280, which again is a colour that I use a lot for drawings, for drawing animals. And what I'm going to start to do is add that into the eye. So starting from the outside edge, I'm going to really softly blend that in a little bit. And we want it to look round, so it tends to be a little bit darker sort of on the outside and then lighter as you get into the middle bit. So I'm always looking for where I can see the colours. Keep looking at the reference. Understand why you're putting that colour down there. So I'm just shading it in, so I'm not really lifting the pencil off, I'm just doing little swirls, little motions to blend that in. You see how that already starts to look a little bit more realistic. Add a little bit up here, but a bit lighter than we did around the edge. And I'm going to blend that up and just softly blend it into that cold grey area at the top. Just blending it into the pupil as well. And let's add a little bit to the top of the eye and just sort of blend it down a bit, because you can see a bit of a brown tone in that top area, even though we added that cold grey. Just going to blend a little bit down. See how that's starting to look a bit more realistic. So a bit more under that highlighted area and a bit more the top of it there. Just going to add a bit more around here. Okie dokie, and I feel like we need more of a red tone, so I'm going to use another colour that I use quite frequently, which is the Burnt Sienna 283, and that is another teeny tiny little stubby pencil, so you can tell that I use it quite a lot. And I'm just going to blend that into the eye to give it a bit of a red tone, so going into like all of those brown areas. Just adding a bit of that red colour, it just creates a bit more of a richness. And by the way, if it looks like I chew my pencils, that's from my pencil sharpener. I've got a manual desk sharpener that clamps the pencil, and people always think that I chew them, but it's just the pencil sharpener. Just a little bit at the top as well. Blend a bit more in there. I want it to be really nice and rich. It's looking nice. Maybe a little bit more here. So I'm still leaving a little gap there. I'm going to add a bit more of a blue turquoisey colour there. So just leaving that for now. Just blending that in to the rest of it. Let's add that bluey colour in now. So this is my favourite colour for adding a bit of a pop of bluey turquoise into the eye. I use it in pretty much every single drawing. Even if I can't see a super strong turquoise colour, I always try and add it in because it just brings the eye to life. You'll see once I put it down, but that is Light Cobalt Turquoise 154. And just use a similar colour or like a bright blue, bright turquoise colour. And I'm just going to add that into that right hand side. Nice turquoise colour. And into the top where that highlight is a little bit. But I'm leaving that white bit there, just that little white bit. Just blending it into the rest. like that. Then I'm going to go back to my dark sepia 175 again. This is probably my most used colour for every tutorial because I just use it so much to add these really dark areas. So what I'm going to do is, if you need to, just go over some of these bits again. When you blend the lighter colours in, it can sort of take away from the crispness and the depth. So you might need to just add it back in a little bit. I just add a little bit more there. And then I'm going to start to blend a little bit of that dark sepia in from the outer edge of the eye. So again, just teeny tiny little swirly motions to blend it in, not pressing too hard. Just keep going over and over it until it looks really blended. And it just makes it look more rich and even like there's more depth in there. Also, I'm just going to bring a bit of a line up there, just next to that other one. I can just see a little bit of a line. Just blend that in a tad. And I'm also going to darken up that pupil again. We can afford to go a little bit darker now. That's it, you just want to gradually be darkening stuff up. You don't want to go too much too soon. You want it to be nice and blended. So you might think it's taken me a long time to do this tiny area, but I want to make sure that I'm giving very clear instructions and explaining why I do things, but also, like I said, you want to get the eyes right. You don't want to rush this part. If the eyes don't look right, the whole thing won't look right. So yeah, it's important that you take your time with this. So just blending that in. Might even add a little bit of a line just there. You can see a bit of a line. And I'm going to blend, and I'm going to just darken that up. I feel like we could do with a darker blue toned colour, so I'm going to use Payne's Grey 181, which is another pencil I use a lot, hence the tiny size of it and the pencil extender. I'll leave the pencil extenders that I use down below too. This is essentially like a blue toned version of the dark sepia, so it's really dark but it's got a bit more blue in it. So I'm going to use that at the top of the eye and just go around that highlight and just give it a bit more of like a dark blue tone. Sometimes it's hard to tell whether you need to use the Payne's Grey or the dark sepia, but sort of just looking for whether it's more of a blue tone or a brown tone. Just blending that in. Might add a teeny tiny little bit here. And a little bit around there. And I think what I might do is add a bit more of that burnt ochre 187 back into the eye. A little bit more in that inner corner. I feel like it needs to be more orange. A bit more in there. A bit more above that pupil. I feel like we need to darken it up a bit more there. That's all good. Maybe a bit more burnt sienna 283. I'm going to add a bit of that into that inner corner as well. Add a bit of that in there. little bit more above the pupil. And let's add a bit more burnt umber to 80 for that brown tone, just to blend it all in. So you do tend to go back with the same colours that you've already used just to further enhance it a little bit more. Blend that a bit above the pupil, maybe a little bit into that top part. Blend it around there. And I think we need a bit of black to really darken that pupil up and make it stand out. I like to use black in my drawings, but only when it's on top of like other colours. I wouldn't just go straight in with black on top of the white, really. I'd always put something else down beforehand because it can look a little bit flat and lifeless. So this is fine because we're using it on top of other colours. So black 199, and you'll see that that pupil will start to just stand out even more now. So just blending that on top. There we go. And feel free to add a bit to darken up some of these different guidelines that we've got. Maybe a little bit around the bottom. So it is quite a small eye for a horse really, because we're doing this relatively small scale, but I don't like to do anything too crazy big for tutorials because then they take probably like 20-30 videos to finish. Nobody wants that, so I'm just going to add a bit of a line here as well. So yeah, it is a bit on the small side, but you need to get used to drawing smaller scale. A lot of the commissions that I do actually are quite small, so it's good to be able to draw at different scales. Right, that is looking pretty good if you ask me. So now I think we need to move on to the areas around the eye, like the eyelid and stuff. So what I'm going to do is just do another bit of a dab with my eraser, just in case I've smudged anything, which can happen. I often use a piece of tracing paper underneath my hand, which I haven't done yet for this tutorial, probably should do. There we go. Okie dokie. And when I'm looking at the fur colour of this horse and the surrounding like area of the eye, I personally feel like it's got a bit of like a muted warm grey colour as the undertone. So I think I'm going to start out with warm grey 1, 270 as the base colour for the fur. Now it's not a colour that you might expect when looking at it, but we're looking at the lightest areas, so around here, some of these little highlighted bits here, it does have this tone to it. Yes, there's other colours involved in there too. We're just trying to figure out what is the lightest colour that we need to make it look right. So I'm going to use this, the warm grey 1, 270. And what I'm going to do is start to blend that around the eye and use that as a base colour. So I am just going over all the dark areas because we're going to darken those up afterwards, but sometimes I just like to have a bit of a base so that it goes on nice and smoothly. So just blending it around. like I said, get rid of any little bits of smudging. There we go, that'll do for now. I've just done the surrounding areas and I'm going to go back to my dark sepia 175, and where it's really dark, you know, like in this bit of the eyelid and stuff, I am just going to start to darken that up so that we can see like the areas of contrast. They call it the different values in drawing. It's like these darker values that sort of make the lighter bits stand out. If we add those in first, it's going to be really clear where we need to draw. So sort of just bringing that down there. And then it gets a little bit lighter here if you look closely, just on that rim of the eye. It's a little bit lighter, so I don't want to go too dark in there. Just going to go around this bit. Sort of blend around that, and where this little line is here, just going to go over that again, bring it up there and just sort of again blend around it a little bit. Go around this bit. So I just blend in a bit at each side of these lines, just to make them look a little bit more 3D. You see how that instantly looks more like the shape of a horse's eye now that we've started to add some of these darker areas in. And let's add this bit in here because this bit's really dark. We can just go and shade that in pretty much. And this bit here where the eyelid is, and it looks a bit flat at the minute. Like I said, we add black on top and it makes it stand out a bit more, but for now we'll just map in these darker areas. So I'm just going to blend a little bit into this inner corner where it's super dark, and just blend into this bit here a little. And let's do this line here and this one where the main bit of the eyelid is, where that crease is. And then there's that other little crease that's inside the eyelid just there. And I'm going to add a bit of shading just above that crease where the eyelid fold is. Just going to add a little bit of shade in there just so that we can see where that is. Like I said, I like to work from light to dark, so I don't like to add too much of the dark shading first, but sometimes it's good just to map in where the main areas are before adding our other colours. So just adding a bit of shade in there. And then this bit just comes down there a little bit. And then there's this bit here. Just map that in, and if need be you might need to add a bit more of that base colour if you've not brought it out far enough. I think I do, so I'm going to add a bit more warm grey 270, bring that out a tiny bit. We always like to have a base colour. So back to my dark sepia 175, just gonna add a little bit of shading in there so that I can see where that area is. I always think it's easier to add the darkest bits in, and then you can sort of work your way through the mid-tones and sort of work your way down to the darkest bit. It just shows you where everything is. It just makes it so much more clear. Right, let's leave that there for now, and we definitely need to start adding a bit of colour into the fur. There is a little bit of a pink tone. You wouldn't necessarily think so, but there is a bit of a pink undertone, so I think we're going to add that in with another colour that I use very often, which is the Beige Red 132. Now if you've got an older Polychromos pencil, it might be called Light Flesh, but they did rename it to Beige Red, so 132 is the number anyway. And I'm going to use this to add a bit of a pink tone. Just blending that in. Really lightly. And this is what I mean when I say it's like we're using the paper as our paint palette. We're mixing it all in together to create a custom colour. Adding it in there. A little bit under the eye. Blend a little bit out here, although it's not super pink, it's almost a bit more brown there, but we'll add a little bit. Can always add other colours back in where needed. Bit there. Okay, it's looking nice and pink now. So we need to add some browns in there, definitely need some browns. We might even need a bit of orange at some point as well, but we can always add that back in on top later to brighten it up a little bit. But I think the next colour that I'm going to use now is the Nougat 178, and this is sort of like a light brown colour. It's not too warm, it's just like a nice neutral brown, and it's what I often use as the first layer of brown colour, just as we start to build the layers up, and then we can add some more rich brown colours on top. So I'm going to use this and start blending that in to the eyelid a little bit. Get that nice brown tone. Often there can be like 10 colours in one section, you know, just all layered up, but it all depends how rich that area needs to be. Let's add a little bit down here. Underneath the eye. And I don't like to go straight in with the burnt umber for areas like this because it's a little bit too dark. We sort of need that colour to make it more gradual and to make it look really soft and well blended. There we go, that's starting to look really good already. Let's just blend it into there a little bit. And I'm not doing any fur strokes just yet because it's not overly like textured with fur around here. It's very soft and almost velvety looking, so I'm just blending it in for now with shading. Gonna add some round here. You see how that's just starting to look more and more like a horse's eye. Blending it round here. Looks a little bit flat still, but we're gradually getting there. So I'm still being quite light. I don't press really hard in these early stages. Okay, let's leave it there for now. We can always add a little bit more afterwards. So let's now move on to the burnt umber and make it look more rich, more like lovely chestnutty brown colour. So burnt umber 280, and I'm going to start to blend that into the really dark areas, give it more of a richness. And then when we start to blend it out, it will just sort of seamlessly blend into the rest. Starting from this top bit. Just doing my little swirls to blend that in nicely. Definitely need to darken up this area here. Just gonna blend a bit of that burnt umber, just give a bit more of a richness to the shadowy area. Add a little bit in here. It'll look really good once we add even more dark sepia and black and stuff in there. Let's darken up these lines. Let's add a little bit of this in here. And you can press a little bit harder now with this if you want to just get a bit more of a pigmented colour down, but don't press too hard, like we're still trying to be careful. But the thing is, the more layers that you build up, the more you can afford to apply a bit more pressure. And blending a bit in here. And let's just do, there's like a little bit more of a line there. Just gonna blend that in. And a bit more just in there. I feel like we're gonna need some more dark sepia to really darken it up. And then we can sort of see what we need to do with the rest of the brown area. So, once again, back to that dark sepia 175. Let's start to apply a bit more pressure and get a bit more depth in some of these shadowy areas. So the paper that I'm using, because it's a hot press watercolour paper, it's like made from cotton, and it's got like a softness to it, so you do have to keep reapplying some of the darker colours. The Strathmore Bristol vellum paper that I usually use for more recent tutorials is a bit harder so you don't tend to have to do it as much. But with hot press watercolour paper you do sort of have to keep reworking it a little bit, but I just love the effect that it gives. Like, I love the look of it, so it's worth it for me. But yeah, it sort of like depends whether you need to keep darkening it up a bit more. Just gonna add some little eyelashes here. I'm just doing some little strokes with the pencil. Just build that up. And I'm gonna darken up these little lines here. And definitely this bottom bit of the eye. Might actually thicken up that line a little bit to make the eye look a bit bigger. And then I need to darken up these bits. And this bit around here. And this bit. And definitely this inner corner, that needs to be a lot darker. And what I might do is I might just add a little bit more of that base colour, the warm grey one, 270, and just bring it out a little bit more. It's getting hot now, it's really sunny today. It's like the 1 week of British summertime that we actually have. So it's really warm. I'm just bringing it out a bit. Gonna add a bit of that Beige Red, 132. Get that pink tone. Just blending it in. And then back to the Nougat 178. I just want to start to map in some little bits of fur. So now I am actually going to start to do some little strokes. And when I say strokes, I mean we're just lifting the pencil up each time we do a little tap, a little tiny line on the paper, and starting to build up a little tiny bit of texture. So you can do it up or down, whatever feels good, whatever sort of blends in nicer for you. And I'm just adding it there, where that slightly darker bit is, where it sort of shows a bit more of the structure of the face. Like that. And then I'm also going to start to just do some little bits coming upwards. Sort of blending up and out of that eye. So just take your time. You have to be patient and do lots and lots of little taps and stuff, but it'll all be worth it. So we're not doing really long strokes because it is very short fur. We're just doing teeny tiny little taps, and we're looking for the direction that the fur is going in, so it sort of comes up a bit like this. And if need be, you can just shade in a little bit. It's totally up to you. Sometimes I like to do some strokes to make it look really nicely textured. Other times I do like just shade it in if it's not overly textured. Adding some down here. And then it's a bit darker, sort of like where this dark line is, it sort of follows around and it's a bit darker, so I'm just going to add some little strokes around here. Just keep putting them on top of each other to build it up. And let's just add those lines back in a little bit more. Just blend out a little bit there. Just need to change my battery. Hopefully that's in a similar place. And then I'm just going to carry on adding some little strokes around the top as well. There is like a bit of a cold grey sort of colour just above that eyelid, so I might blend a bit of something in a second. But for now I'll just keep blending that out a little bit. Let's add a little bit more of this around here. Right, let's add that cold grey one, 230. I'm just going to blend that in where I can see that slightly cooler tone, just here above the eyelid. And a little bit here, I think. I know I said you don't put light colours over dark, but if you're working on top of it, it's fine. Like it starts to go a bit mucky. You can see it goes a little bit patchy and stuff. But we're going to be adding stuff on top of it, so it's not too bad. So I'm going to go back to the burnt umber 280, and I just want to start to add a little bit more depth. So just going over what we've done here with the Nougat and darkening it up. I think we'll probably need a bit of a red tone as well at some point, but we'll just add this for now. going to blend this into this bit. Darken up that line a bit. Darken up these lines. And just keep blending that in. And a bit more around here. Just looking for the sort of changes in shape and structure where the fur is a little bit darker. Add a little bit of this up here. And let's just add a bit of a line there where you can see that side of the face, the structure sort of comes down a bit like that. Just add a little bit of shading. Add a bit of this up here. It's another little line sort of just there. I'm trying to get the main shape of everything. So it comes down there like that. And I might just blend that warm grey 1 270 right to that line, and then at least that's like a clear section. A little bit of that beige red 132. There we go. Then let's add a bit of the Nougat 178 and just start to blend that from that line that we've done. Just do some little strokes to try and make it look a bit more 3D. Then back to the burnt umber 280. Add a little bit more of that to get a bit more texture. Doing some little strokes. We're definitely going to need some more like rich colours in this eye as well, I think. I'm going to add some little lines here. I can just see. Let's blend those in a little bit. It's like a bit of a line just here. Blend that in a bit. Add a bit more of that there. And let's add a little bit more dark sepia, 175, and just start to blend that out. Around here. Doing my little swirls. Darken up this little bit here. And this little bit here. A bit more around there. And around here. And let's add some black, 199, into these really dark bits. And then we can sort of see how dark we need to go with the rest of it. So, just blending that in. Darkening up the bits around the eyes. This bit here. This bit of the eyelid. Darken up this bit. And this bit here. And then I might just be tempted to add a bit more burnt sienna 283 into the eye, just give it more of that rich red tone. And I'm also going to add some up here. Around here, get that nice rich red colour. Into this bit a little. Bit more up here. Blending it all in. And I might just be tempted to add a bit of Cold Grey 5234, which is like a darker version of the Cold Grey 1 that we first used. And I want to use that here. I just feel like we need to add a bit of that there to give it that soft, velvety grey sort of look. So I'm just going to blend that in. I feel like that looks a lot better already. So I'll just round that inner part of the eyelid. Blend it a little bit around here, I reckon. Maybe a little bit under the eye as well. A little bit around here, there's like a little bit of a colder tone. A little bit in that eyelid there. Just blend it in. That already looks a little bit better. A bit more up here. A little bit more around here. Just blend that in. A little bit more there. And I'm just going to add a little bit of black 199 just into this really dark area. Just try and blend it in really softly. And maybe a little bit more in there. Try and blend that in. A little bit more in that inner corner. A little bit more up there. And I'm just going to finish off by adding a bit more burnt umber 280 again. So just going to use that to add a bit more richness to the brown. So I'm starting on this upper eyelid. And down here. Apply a bit more in here. A bit more here. And Definitely some more on this bit. I'm just shading it in now because it's a little bit quicker. We're just trying to get that depth in there. A little bit more around here. Definitely a bit more there. And let's just add a little bit more here. So it does take a lot of leaves. You just have to keep going back over things and, you know, adding more. That's just the way that it is with coloured pencils. The results that you get are beautiful, so it's worth it. You just have to be patient. A bit more around there. And I think I am going to leave that part there for now. We've made some good progress. We need to do a lot more around the eye, but it's a good start, and I think hopefully you'll be getting the hang of it a little bit more now. So I really hope you've enjoyed drawing this first part with me, and make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to see the next part or to see more tutorials like this. So I will see you in the next video, and bye for now.